Hello and welcome. You're watching UATV News with me, Ksenia Bugay. First, this hour, President Volodymyr Zelensky announced the remaining 3 questions to be asked during the all-Ukrainian poll. It is planned to be held on October 25th, the local elections day.
Усім привіт! 25 жовтня на виборчій дільниці.
On October the 25th, any citizen will have an opportunity to share his or her opinion on 5 important issues. Therefore, question number 3. Should the number of MPs in the Verkhovna Rada be decreased to 300? The 4th question is, do you support legalization of the medical cannabis to reduce severely ill patients' pain? And question number 5. In 1994, the Budapest Memorandum has been signed. The USA, United Kingdom and Russia provided an absolute guarantee of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, while Ukraine took an obligation to get rid of the nuclear weapons. Should Ukraine, a country that had a part of its territory annexed, raise the issue of commitments to the obligations under the memorandum on an international level? That is, either all signatories fulfill their obligations or none.
Earlier, the president announced the first 2 questions. They relate to a life sentence for corruption on an especially large scale and the creation of a free economic zone in Donbas. A decrease in the number of MPs may have a positive effect on the quality of representation of voters' interests. Parliament could become even more professional. That's why the president suggested people to talk about the reduction of the deputy corps. In August 2019, Volodymyr Zelensky initiated a bill on amending the constitution, which proposes to reduce the number of people's deputies. 300 votes in favor are needed to approve this amendment. Investment attraction and new workplaces. These are the opportunities Ukrainian territorial communities would get after acquiring the state lands into their own property. President of Ukraine has already signed an order which will start this process in the nearest future. How will local governments use the resource? Our correspondents know.
A complete decentralization of agricultural lands. For decades, the state owned thousands of hectares of land. From now on, this land would start bringing profit to territorial communities locating on it. Unfortunately, far back in 2002, Ukraine has created a strongly centralized land management system. A while ago, an amendment to the land code was introduced saying that local governments of certain areas elected by local residents could manage lands, located only in localities' boundaries. The lands outside those boundaries were managed by officials from Kyiv, local state administrations and State Service of Ukraine for Geodesy, Cartography and Cadastre. Now the state is going to transfer all its agricultural lands to local government's management. Some territorial communities have already received property rights for the land plots. However, it's now prohibited to sell them. Renting is possible only via auctions. The pioneers, however, say the land has attracted investors to the communities. Some rent it to large agricultural producers. This experience appears to be the most successful. Because besides money for rent, the communities get the money from the single tax, if it is a small farmstead, or money to pay income taxes. 2 million hectares of agricultural lands would be given to local communities. Later, they will get an opportunity to manage other resources located in their territories. Till the end of the year, we are going to approve the draft law number 2194, which foresees the allocation of not only agricultural lands, but also water resources, forest lands of other purposes. In general, every natural resource located on the territory of a certain community. Only lands used for defense purposes and lands used by state enterprises, entities and organizations would remain in the state property. President of Ukraine stresses that communities' right to manage their own lands is a basis of decentralization. The communities know it better how to organize their lives. They know where to build a kindergarten, school, roads, gardens and industrial objects. The transfer of lands would begin on October 26th after the local election. Experts note that reissuance of documents and inventory procedures would take time, and the communities will get their first income already next year. Reported by Vadim Kramer, UATV News.
Ukraine reports another anti-record in terms of COVID-19. 5,992 new cases have been confirmed in the country over the past day. In total, there are more than 287,000 infected people. Almost 160,000 are undergoing treatment. Kharkiv region remains the leader in the spread of coronavirus.
За минулу добу було госпіталізовано 866 людей.
Over the past 24 hours, 866 people have been hospitalized. And now we have 22,240 patients hospitalized. The number of additional places in our hospitals is 52,000 beds. It is according to our medical system based on the availability of our doctors and medical staff. And we simply cannot afford the rest because there are other diseases.
A critical supply of water remains in the reservoirs of the annexed Crimea. The main reservoirs of the peninsula have less than 10 million cubic meters of water. The mountain reservoir is almost dry. It is impossible to pump water from it. Self-proclaimed authorities say there will be enough water for another 81 days. According to local social networks, drinking water in the autumn-winter period will be served no more than twice a week. The water level in Crimea decreased because the North Crimean Canal was blocked by Ukraine after the annexation of the peninsula in 2014. The Invictus Games, an international sporting event for wounded, injured and sick servicemen and women, both serving and veterans, will soon kick off in Ukraine. This year it will be held online because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The competition itself will be held between October 31st and November 22nd.
Athletics, powerlifting, archery, swimming, rowing and cycling will remain unchanged for the Invictus Games. However, the organizers decided to switch this year's format of the event to online mode. For example, a person chose a rowing simulator. Fortunately, this is no longer a problem because it is available in the gym in almost every city. The assistant is making video to make sure that this particular participant is performing an exercise. First, assistant records 1 minute of rowing, then the simulator screen where the result is highlighted. After that, the form is filled out, a video file is attached and the result is sent to judges. They will record the time and correctness of the performance. Thanks to the online format, veterans from all over Ukraine will be able to participate in the games. Previously, this was unrealistic since they took place on the sports grounds of Lviv, Kyiv and Odessa.
Last year, 218 wounded servicemen and veterans took part in the Invictus Games. This is the largest veteran competition that took place in Ukraine. So far, there are no other events that would gather a larger number of veterans. But in our opinion, this is not enough anyway. There are more than 10,000 wounded veterans and military personnel in our country.
Organizers believe that thanks to the online format of the competition, at least twice as many veterans will undergo rehabilitation this year in comparison with the past. The proposed project of online games was indeed a breakthrough in the development of the rehabilitation system. This is one of the most modern approaches, and by the way, the transition to online allows you to attract even more people, even more veterans to this work. In addition to the Invictus Games, several more programs designed to rehabilitate veterans who got disabilities during the hostilities have been launched in Ukraine. However, because of the quarantine, most of them were not fully implemented this year. Reported by Volodymyr Zelensky, UATV News.
Instead of potatoes, a Kherson farmer decided to plant persimmons, lemons and figs in his garden. Hundreds of species of overseas trees and bushes grow in one land plot. Our correspondent saw the exotic garden.
Welcome to our fairy tale. A real botanical garden appeared in one of the vegetable gardens in the Kherson region. Pines, firs, palms and cedars grow here. This is what I planted this year. These are exotic fruit. I hope we will make fruit cocktails soon. And this is our reed. Earlier, Igor grew tomatoes and squashes on his land plot. Then he decided to plant lemons. The exotic garden grew every year. Little by little, planting palm trees, lemons, oranges and naranjilla became my hobby. These are results of our work. Igor harvests figs several times a year. This tree grows very quickly, just after a year planting, and it bears fruit. Pomegranates are growing next to it. These are pomegranates. This will be an alley of pomegranates and several types of persimmons. This type of fruit is grown in the Kherson region. It is acclimatized. It feels perfectly in our area. The man orders seeds and seedlings on the internet. Some of them have been brought from the Crimea and abroad. With climate change, the farmer says, overseas trees are more and more often found at the land plots of Kherson residents. Each of them requires care and attention. Figs love water. Its roots have to be in water. The so-called head should in the sun. It likes sunny place, good watering, and of course fertilized soil. Growing exotic fruit in our climatic conditions is not easy, Igor says. It takes 2 days to water all the trees, but his wife has no fears in experimenting with the harvest.
Fig jam is among the latest novelties. This is a fig preserve made this year. We have already tried all sorts of fruit preservation. Our children do not have a great appetite, so we treat our friends and send it to the front line to our servicemen.
Now Igor is trying to grow bananas and kiwi. If everything works out, he will make a plantation of these fruits unusual for the south of Ukraine. Reported by Volodymyr Zelensky, UATV News.
A 1,000-year-old burial site was discovered in the garden and the village of Shiroka Balka in Kherson region. Locals found a place where citizens of the Golden Cape settlement dating back to the 1st century AD were buried. The discovery was reported to the village council while the archaeologists were getting to the place. The villagers filled the excavation site with concrete. Our correspondents know more.
Just here in this pit of 2 meters, the guys found the site. Maria says she called the men to dig a new drain hole. They dug and at the depth of 2 meters found a burial in the middle of the yard.
And this man who was digging found a skull. Well, they took out that skull, put the bones here and started digging up those bones.
The gravestone was broken while they were digging, and the remains were put in a heap. The discovery was reported to the village council the next day. While the scientists were heading to the village, locals filled the site with concrete. Of course, the process should have been stopped, but it happened so that at the moment it was all pulled out and unfortunately was destroyed. But people did not know what they found. No one could even expect. Scientists suggest that a burial of the 1st or 3rd centuries AD was dug up in the yard. Right there, not far from the village, there is one more archaeological monument, the ancient settlement of the Golden Cape. The last time excavations were carried out here in the 80s. People lived here, but they buried their dead on the other side, and so part of this burial ground is located under the village. At the place which was dug up by the villagers, valuable artifacts could be located. There should be some things with the skeleton found, because the funeral rite of the inhabitants of Olbia at that time implies that he is accompanied by 1 or 2 jars, some kind of a knife or something else. Local guide Oleg Marchuk is sure that tourists come here with pleasure. He is disappointed that the valuable discovery has not been studied in detail by archaeologists. This is part of our local history. I am interested in the fact that there are really objects that can bring people, tourists here. One of them is the Golden Cape. Scientists have got only the remains which will be studied in the laboratory. It is already pointless to carry out any work on the burial site now. The place is filled with concrete and is lost for science. Archaeologists ask the locals to be more curious and first of all wait for scientists having found anything. Reported by Volodymyr Zelensky, UATV News.
That was our final story this hour. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. More updates on our official website, YouTube, Facebook and Twitter pages.